Okay, so do we want to just get straight into it?
Yeah, if you would like to.
Okay, so I will start by saying, hi, Vicky. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Although technical difficulties, if
You're
anybody
not
looks at any video
today.
clips.
So sad. You've lost your
I'm
brand.
off-brand. I'm off-brand, and we'll lose sponsorship from the Velvet Curtain Company. But we're going to have to push on.
They're our only income color.
I'm probably just making mistakes because I'm giddy because we have wonderful guests, not one, but two. So if you would like, I can do a little intro to set the scene.
Yes, please.
Yeah, sounds
okay. So today we are very happy to be welcoming Adele Cordner and Claire Drewitt, both of the Her Story Theatre Company and many other things. Her Story is a group founded in South Wales to explore the lives of women in history and today through engaging theatre experience. And they do this by writing and performing original plays with a focus on entertainment and elevating the narratives of women. You'll notice that I'm pulling these words directly from your excellent website, ladies. You're all about putting these women center stage. So that just aligns so much with what Vicky wanted to do with She Changed History, and I've been very glad to come along and help with. So your current touring production is Daughter of Bala, and to give it the précis that, again, I'm a shameless thief. I've pulled this from the Glengower Workman's Hall précis, where they say it is the captivating life story of Betsi Cadwaladr. So we're going from her humble beginnings in Wales to her globe-trotting escapades in service. And before we hear all about Betsy, I was hoping that we could learn a little bit more about you. So how are you guys involved? What is your part in the theatre troupe and in the play?
Well, I am a writer, so I'm a playwright, and I was previously a copywriter, and then I decided to take a master's degree in script writing. So yes, now I'm a playwright, which is fantastic. I love it. It's lovely to explore the creative avenues, and I have a particular interest in writing women's stories. And so I have Claire, who was my wonderful friend, and two other lovely friends as well, Alison and Linda. And we all got together and decided we'd like to make a theatre company, to form a theatre company to tell the stories of women, which I would write. So the first one that we came across was Betsi Cadwaladr's story. And I'm also a performer and director, which I have been for, gosh, I don't know, since I was really little as a performer anyway. And I've known Claire through community theatre production together, as with Linda and Alison, and we just decided, let's go for it. Let's make a small touring theatre company, and let's tour it to tell women's stories, especially women of a particular age, because we, as performers, we realised that there weren't many roles for women of our kind of age, and we want those roles. We want these strong roles and these strong women, and we want women to be the main protagonists, and that was one of my main ambitions in my writing, to make women the centre of the story, and particularly an older woman, maybe at times. That was my ambition in writing the play to begin with. And Claire was absolutely brilliant, and I wrote it with Claire in mind to play Betsy, and she is absolutely an absolute star playing Betsy.
I was so lucky to be friendly with Adele. We've acted together, and I've directed Adele, she's directed me. For years now, I've been performing since I was probably knee-high to a grasshopper. And it was just amazing to be able to work with Adele in setting up this theatre company and bringing Betsy to the stage, and her story was absolutely fantastic. It's been really, really good fun, and an amazing chance to play an incredible character from history. I've loved it.
This is fascinating, guys. What Cara said earlier about being giddy, I definitely already am yes, this is fantastic. And we were talking last week, weren't we, Cara, about Nicole Kidman, and there's kind of this, not movement, that's such a dramatic word, but there's definitely more conscientious moves towards women of whatever phrase you used,
Yeah,
I
a
was going to
certain
say
age,
of a
I
certain
think.
age.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A
I didn't
certain
want
age.
to drag the
Yeah.
Greg Wallace thing up. But yeah, but no, it's so thoughtful. It's just lots of different threads that we don't normally get to see and get to peek behind that curtain of stories and stuff like that. And actually, we've done how many episodes now, Cara? Like 35, something like that. And we haven't yet gotten to Wales. So this is very
wow.
exciting.
This is,
Wow.
yeah.
You're our
That's
first Welsh
amazing.
story. So,
Yeah.
yes, I'd love to learn a little bit more about Betsy if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Yeah, well, we were really amazed actually that her story hadn't been told before in terms of as a theatrical production or film or TV. Really amazed because I read it's her autobiography. She wrote it herself, but with a ghostwriter, if you like. So she calls it an autobiography, but she had this amazing friend who was a historian at the time called Jane Williams, and she asked her to write it for her because she was a lady, working class background from North Wales in Bala, and very, very humble beginnings. And she knew that if this lady historian wrote it for her, it would be more believable. And also, Jane Williams, in writing this autobiography, as she called it, researched all of the facts that Betsy told her about her life, which are totally incredible. I mean, you'd read it and you'd think that can't possibly have happened. She can't possibly have been at the Battle of Waterloo. She can't possibly have met a bishop when she was traveling around the world. She can't possibly have gone to Australia, and literally countries all over the world, South America, everywhere that you can think of, she went in her lifetime. And you keep pinching yourself as you turn each page and think, no, this can't possibly be true. But Jane Williams has actually cross-checked all of the facts and made sure that they were true, and put little clips of evidence in the book as well, which is really interesting because there are footnotes on every single page giving evidence that that these things most likely did happen because they were at the time that Betsy was traveling, and that the people she said she met, she even said she met the Emperor of China. Accidentally walking into a hall where he was sitting on the floor smoking a pipe, because she was on an adventure there at the time, and she was very adventurous and just went exploring off by herself. So she was an absolute incredible character. And I just read the book, couldn't stop turning the pages. And then said to Claire and Linda and Alison, we've got to tell this story.
So the Battle of Waterloo is like 1850, isn't it? So was she born
in
1700?
1789?
89, yeah, born in 1789.
1789 in Bala, to a family with 16 children.
Yeah.
Wow.
And she's mostly known in Wales today only as a name through one of the house boards is named after her. So there's the Betsi Cadwaladr house board in North Wales, but nobody knows her story. We found really, researching with our audiences and everything, that they all pretty much to a man said afterwards, gosh, I knew nothing about her. All I knew was she's the name of the house board. And it's been incredible to learn something about her. Because just to list the things that she did, she was a heck of a gal. And she was, so feisty and stood up for Wales and for herself and for women and for nurses, and was absolutely an incredible woman. And for her to have been living in that time as well and to have done it all in long skirts and corsets is something else entirely,
You've touched on two things. One of the points that was made was that she wasn't afraid to speak her mind, to say it like it was. And that led to a particular confrontation that was noted with a famous figure, which was interesting for us because we have covered another character in the past who also had a run-in with this figure. So Betsy and Florence Nightingale got into it, from what I could see. Could you say more about that? Was that an example of her being out there and just being put into close quarters with someone who didn't see things the way she did?
Yes, I think it was, absolutely. I think they clashed, I think, from the beginning, partly because of their backgrounds. Florence Nightingale was an English lady, and Betsy was a Welsh working class woman. And so they clashed on that front. Betsy was very determined to break the rules when it came to the Crimean War. And that's one of the reasons why she wanted to publish her book. She wanted to tell the story of the Crimean War from her point of view. And she really wanted to speak truth to power. And she actually was really critical in her book of the government and of their handling of the situation in the Crimean War, because they had lots and lots of free gifts that the public had donated for the soldiers, things like foodstuffs and clothing items. Yeah.
Blankets.
Yeah.
I mean, very similar to people today sending stuff out to war-torn countries, to help.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But these supplies were not allowed to be released to the men without signatures from a doctor and then military men as well. So the doctors were just all too busy. There was hardly any doctors there, and they were looking after like hundreds and hundreds of patients and soldiers who were very badly wounded. So they didn't have time to be signing requisitions and getting them countersigned. But Florence Nightingale was very much, she was trying to control the situation by the book, and she had been sent there to be in charge of the nurses and to be in charge of all the supplies. So she was trying to keep everything under control, whereas Betsy was saying, just let us go into the storerooms and grab these things that we need, and never mind the signatures. And Florence was very much following the rules and was like, no, we can't possibly do that. It has to all be done properly. And that's where they clashed. That was one of the things that they clashed over.
The other way that they majorly clashed as well was the battlefield and the soldiers in the Crimea, whereas Florence Nightingale was mostly based in Scutari in Turkey, which was about 300 miles from where the men were actually being injured. And Betsy had a kind of complained that the nurses weren't allowed to go on the wards and help the men in the hospital at Scutari, and she felt like she was being useless. And so she campaigned and fought with Florence Nightingale to be sent out to Balaclava, actually to the Crimea, so she could nurse the soldiers there. And I think when she did get there as well, she just took over and got things going to the men, got them, turned her horror at what she saw there into action, and got, beds for the men, got them organised, started a kitchen, started cooking on braziers for all the men and making sure that they had a good diet, and then making friends with Lord Raglan, who was very supportive of her efforts in helping the men up front.
Yeah. She was very actiony, just want to get stuck in and do it.
Yes, yeah. She was incredibly frustrated when she first got to the Crimea that she didn't actually get there. They kept her on but first they sent her to a house. Yeah, it was Therapia, wasn't it? It was a house belonging to the local ambassador, and they sent them there for a week or two. They kind of kept them away from even from the Scutari base for weeks on end, and she couldn't understand why. She just wanted to get straight to the men and get to work and help and nurse them. And she discovered later that it was because Florence Nightingale didn't actually want any more nurses. She went out with a group of 40, and she didn't expect any more. She didn't have facilities for any more. She felt she didn't have a budget for any more. She didn't have anywhere to sleep. And so she was really angry apparently when she realized that this extra party of nurses had been sent, and she didn't know how she was going to cope with that, because she was barely coping, I think, with having 40. It was too much because of the situation there and the conditions, which were horrendous. And she was horrified at having to cope with more nurses. And so Betsy didn't discover that until she actually arrived later, after petitioning the lady who was kind of looking after them all and saying, we want to go. And she was getting very, very frustrated and angry.
At her age, in order to get there. Wow.
Yeah.
I think incredible. She said that she was 55 in order to be sent out there, but she was actually 65 when she travelled there. Which is, really something. Yeah. Absolutely. And she worked herself to the bone. She slept in the kitchen so that she could be on hand if anybody needed her in the night, and just exhausted herself in order to serve her fellow countrymen.
She was, from the minute she read it in the newspaper, she was living in London at the time, and she was working as a housekeeper, and she had recently trained as a nurse at Guy's Hospital in London. And she'd had a whole lifetime of travel, which we can tell you about as well, because she spent literally, up until that point, she'd travelled the world on a ship and worked as a housekeeper, as a nanny. She'd done so many different jobs. And she was working in London and read about the Crimean War in the newspaper and was really horrified at what state the soldiers were reported to be in. And this was, of course, the first time that that battlefield reporting happened, that we actually had reporters who could tell the story of what was happening there. And everybody was horrified, apparently, in the country when they read about this and the poor soldiers being treated so badly. But Betsy was like, straight away, her first thought was, I'm going. I've got to find out what's happening. I'm going. I'm getting on a ship and I'm going. And she just did absolutely everything to get there. She literally went to see anyone she could think of, any friends and contacts that she could think of that would help her to get there. She would walk across London to find them and persuade them to let her see the lady who was organising the nurses. And how, I just can't believe she actually did that and actually got there out of just 40 nurses. And a lot of them were nuns as well. So it was a very, very small number that she managed to persuade them that she was a good nurse and that she would serve well. And also that she was 10 years younger than she really was.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm hearing tenacity, I'm hearing courage, and I'm hearing excellent skincare routine because she's pulling off saying she's 10 years younger. That is not nothing, let me tell you.
Yeah.
So the courage to throw herself out there and get into it. You've just mentioned that she traveled before the Crimea, which I hadn't realized. So she was already out exploring the world as a woman at that point in history. That's crazy. Can you say more about that?
So she ran away from home when she was about 9 and went to live with some people who were still living in Ballarat in a big house, a reverend and his wife. And she was a companion to the wife who taught her to read and write, to speak English, to play the harp, but she wanted to stay independent. She wanted to do something for herself. So she ran away from that house and got a passage on a ship to Liverpool and went into service there. She had various jobs in Liverpool. Then she she was working for a pretty nasty woman by the sound of it, and told her story to a passerby who turned out to be an Indian princess who was married to a nobleman called Sir George, and she went to work in their household. And she travelled with them on the grand tour around Europe, which is where she went to the aftermath of the Battle of Waterloo, and she met the young Napoleon. She was in Paris when King Louis XVIII was restored. She climbed Vesuvius. She went to Spain. She had an incredible journey there, and that gave her a real taste for travel. And she then got a job on board ship.
See why you were like, we need to fact check this autobiography.
Yeah,
So random.
So she travelled all over the world. She spent quite a long time in Australia. She had lots of proposals of marriage from people all over the world, but she never wanted to lose her independence. She always decided that she would stay single. So there were apparently a lot of proposals in Australia where there were 30 men to every woman there. So she did well to churn out then. One guy kidnapped her and tried to marry her by force, but she ran away again.
That's not a proposal.
Yeah,
that's not okay. That's not how we do things.
That she stood up to him and ran off. She was in India for quite a time. There's a lovely story that we tell in the play where she was sent with 3 Burmese ladies, wanted to go from the ship back to their home in a village. And Betsy was asked to accompany them because nobody else would go. So she said, well, I will. And it turned out that they were sent on elephants. Somebody just whispered in the ear of the elephant. They set off through the jungle for a full day and evening, then stopped at a random hosting house where they spent the night, got back on the elephants the next day, whispered in their ear, off they went again to the place where the Burmese ladies were going to, and then Betsy was sent back on the elephant by herself, all the way to the ship.
It makes Uber look pretty weak, doesn't it?
Exactly.
She would look for a Welsh chapel as well, or a Welsh-speaking community, and invariably find one as well, which was really incredible. because she was Welsh speaking, obviously, from birth, and her father was also a very famous Welsh preacher. So religion was very important to her. The Bible was very important to her. And she actually had the first copy of the Welsh Bible, the same one that Mary Jones had. You might have heard the story of Mary Jones, who had the first Welsh Bible that was published. And the man who published this Bible was actually a family friend of Betsy's. So she got the same one as well. So she carried this Bible with her all her life. And she lived her life by the Bible in a very, very honest, really, really honest, fiercely honest. And she really hated to see anything that was dishonest. And if any of the people that she worked for were ever treated her badly, she wouldn't accept it. She would actually stand up for herself and confront, the problem. And if she was ever accused of anything that she was innocent of, she would absolutely deny it and stand up and say, no, I did not do that, and I can prove it, and this is what happened. And she gives quite a few incidences in the book. And in one case, I think she walked away from one of her bosses when she got accused of something, and she was like, no, I've had enough, I'm going. And she just went and left.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because many servants, I think, in that time were probably very badly treated, and especially the working class women servants were probably at the bottom of the pile, I should imagine. But she wasn't having any of that. She was always she had a lot of self-respect, I think. But her travels, the animals, she describes me, seeing a serpent, a huge serpent that gets chased by horses and men on horses to get killed coming through a village. And she describes seeing a panther on a remote beach. And camel. She went on a camel ride as well. she got sent off on a camel, and again just got on the camel and had the camel's back was slapped, and it just kept going. And she had to ask somebody, "How do I stop?" After she'd been going half a day, and they just turned the camel around and slapped it and sent it back.
Oh my God.
So she said, but she was so brave and so utterly fearless in all her adventures. It was quite incredible. So I think that led into then going to the Crimea. By the time she'd had all those adventures and then decided to come back to London and work, I think she thought she wouldn't travel again at that point, that she'd had enough. But then when she saw the problems in the Crimea, she was desperate to go and get back on the ship and go and find out about it. And she didn't have any fear because she'd already survived several storms on board these huge wooden ships. I just can't believe she survived half of the storms she describes, because they are horrendous and the ships have had to put into port for months and months to get repaired. And she's not phased. She just gets back on when it's repaired and ready to go. Off she goes again.
And was she doing all this stuff in like the Victorianist costume, like the wear? Was she doing that in the... She wasn't... That's amazing.
Yeah, she was then wearing her dress still.
And when you are on stage, you are wearing these elaborate costumes as well. And you look wonderful. Did it, however, give you a sense of, good God, how did anyone get anything done? Because it looks like an awful lot going on, layers and corsets and bustles and who knows what.
Yeah, it is a lot, and it does make you think, good grief, I'm struggling here. I'm boiling hot because I'm running around for an hour on stage. But this was her life. And she was in, Turkey and India and Australia, not in temperate places at all. I honestly don't know how women did it back in the day. And I think that feeds into the whole idea of telling their stories, because they were doing it with an incredible mountain to climb before they even started doing anything. Because the whole, hygiene and costume and everything was so difficult for them to overcome, that any woman doing anything in those days, I think, is really worthy of praise. It's quite incredible.
Especially when you add menopause and also time in the morning. It was so long.
I need somebody to help me get dressed.
Yes, Claire does. Claire has to be tied into the corset for every performance. And then obviously loosened out of it, because Claire can't get in and out of her costume by herself. It's impossible, because we have to tie the back, and it is quite a lot of layers and a lot of complications. And have petticoats and boots, which they would have worn, and bonnets. Her head was always covered, and even if it was a light cap, she would have always had her head covered. It was a lot to
Yeah.
bear, but she never complained about that. She was quite proud, I think, of being very clean and tidy. She talks a lot about clothes when she goes to the Crimea, because they only gave them one uniform to begin with. She was like, oh, I can't manage with that. You know, I need more. So she took all her own for spares. But she said that some of the nurses wouldn't have had spare dresses to take.
They couldn't keep their trunks on board the ship. They had to travel in the hold. So they had no access the whole time to their spare clothes. They just had what they were standing up in.
Oh dear.
Yeah, all the way there.
And that was for a journey of weeks and weeks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I bet it was very
was,
smelly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Must have been, can you imagine? Yeah, but she was very annoyed about that, because she liked to be clean, especially, you know, when she was nursing. Well, in all of her jobs, actually.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. And even as a housekeeper, she was very particular about being clean and tidy and presentable. You know, that was something she was very, very conscious of. And so that really frustrated her when they only gave her very minimal amount of clothing and uniform. And she did make a point of that.
It's very interesting to hear the things you're saying about her being particular about being honest and scrupulous. And I think, in common with a lot of the women we talk about, she has come from such a humble background, and she has decided a standard for herself. She said, this is what I'm going to work to. That hasn't been imposed from the outside. And I wonder if that gives a kind of flexibility that maybe your Florence Nightingales might not have, because they've come through a system where everything is orderly and everything works. And so you just follow the rules and then everything's fine. But I find it so interesting that she is a self-made woman in a very literal sense. She left her family home at 9 and got out there into the world. I can absolutely see why you read this book and thought, this is a story that needs to be told. Are there other women on your radar right now who you're starting to kind of think that you might like to do something about in the future?
Yes, we're currently hoping to do a production now. We've started our research and thinking about a play about Mary Frost. Now, she is the wife of John Frost, who you may have heard of. We've read a wonderful book by Sylvia Mason, who has told her story, really. So we've been speaking to Sylvia about that and asking her if she would, you know, if she thinks it would make a good play. And she's very excited as well about making that into a play. So she's on our radar now at the moment, and we're hoping to turn this into a production in the near future. So that will hopefully be our next production. So yes, Mary's story is very much untold, because obviously John Frost's story has been told many, many times. But Mary was the silent woman behind him for the whole of the Chartist movement's time. So we thought it would be really interesting to explore a story from that angle. Quite a different woman to Betsy, I think, but very interesting in a different way, in that she's playing a role in the background the whole time. But because that was how ladies had to be at that time, you know, most ladies, even for when we talked about Florence Nightingale as a lady, she had an absolute battle to get accepted as a nurse, and from her family. She had to really rebel against her family to get to where she did. It was just not the done thing for a lady, you know, to go in hospitals and to work. And to be at that close proximity to men, especially to work with men. So in her own way, she also had a class battle.
Florence Nightingale comes up a lot, and we don't ever take away from what she achieved. Like, she had her own light and her own, like you say, battles and stuff. But I think she's such a prominent figure, especially in English education, as like primary school. Like, I swear we did like 6 weeks on her in primary school. Like, she's such a prominent figure. So anything that goes against that narrative that we were taught of kids is very interesting, and it's very like, it makes you realise how complex these women are, and how many layers there are to these stories, and then trying to tell those stories in a succinct and entertaining way is very I wouldn't say it's hard. I enjoy it, but I wonder how you feel. Like, how is it taking that book that you read about Betsy and then turn it into a play? What's that process? How does that? Do you have a set system, or is it quite organic?
Yeah, I think it was quite organic, really. I started out writing a one-woman play, and that was sort of how it first of all came to me, as a one-woman play, because I just saw Betsy as such a driving force. I thought she's just going to literally speak the narrative and tell the story almost as she does in her own book. But then when we presented it like that, we had a read through of a first reading of the very first draft. And Claire, you can say how you felt about it.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that we heard me read it and thought we need more people in this. No, when we read the story, we realised that there were so many things that had happened, so many events, so many other people involved, that we decided to do it as a two-person play, to have Jane Williams, who wrote the autobiography, bookend the play at either end, and to have Betsy then telling the story with a series of flashbacks, which Jane Williams would then become other people in that story. So in our production, Adele played Jane Williams and played 14 other people who Betsy meets throughout her life, male and female. And that brought a real sense of liveliness to the production, I think, and a lot of humour as well. You know, it's nice to see Adele with a moustache on a stick, you know, that kind of thing. And it gave the audience permission to find these things funny and to engage with it a lot more. And that was really important to us, was to be able to speak to the audience and be able to really bring them in and feel their emotion through it as well. And we've had lovely experiences with audiences, you know, laughing throughout and crying as well at the sad bits and really engaging with us. It's been lovely to experience, and lovely as well to feel that you're bringing a woman's story to people, to women and men who have had no idea about it before and who can really appreciate it. And we're hoping to do that with all the plays that we produce, you know, with Mary Frost as well, who had a real quiet strength, but who was a kind of in the eye of the storm of the Chartist movement and keeping her family going and keeping everything going with a real quiet strength, I'd say. Yeah. And again, that's something which I think can really engage audiences and which you can feel a sympathy with.
Yeah, I think the audience engagement was really important for me as well when I was writing it, and for Claire as well as a performer. And Claire actually does go down to the audience. We've performed in sort of small studio type venues where we have been able to get quite good eye contact with the audience and to go up to them. And Claire involves them in a dance and in the storm scene, and you know, she really brings the audience in. And it's, you know, the reaction that we've had has been amazing. People have really enjoyed that connection, and I think it's really helped them to understand the story and to understand Betsy's character. And quite often people have said to us at the end that Claire really is Betsy. They've said, "Oh my gosh, it is like she is actually here, you know, in the room." It's so and we did a lovely performance for a school as well, a primary school, which was lovely. They were only six and 7, bless them, and they really, really believed that Claire was Betsy. And you know, they asked her lots of questions afterwards about how do you like to travelling, what country she liked best, and it was absolutely adorable. And they were really, really engaged in the whole story and wanted to know more, and they loved all the history and all the facts. They were so interested, weren't they, Claire? They were absolutely.
It was really lovely. We've done performances to smaller sort of community groups. And we've also been lucky enough that we've engaged a lot of nurses as well. And you will very often find that people will say afterwards, "Oh, I was a nurse and I never really knew much about Betsy, but gosh, she was so right. Yeah, she was ahead of her time in thinking about hygiene and food and everything." It was wonderful to hear how she stood up for nurses and for nursing and for the training of nurses as well.
We were very lucky to have support from Donna Mead, who has done extensive research on Betsy. She was amazing. She gave us lots of information, background information. She had actually found Betsy's grave in London because Betsy was actually buried as a pauper, very sadly. And although she published this autobiography, it was literally ignored. It was completely ignored. It was just written off as the lies, ramblings of a crazy Welsh woman. and completely ignored and buried because, of course, she was speaking truth to power. She was criticising the government. She was Welsh, and at that time, the government was trying very hard to suppress Welsh nationalism and the Welsh language. And they were installing English priests in Welsh churches. They were trying to suppress the language and put the English language in all education and stop Welsh language teaching. And the last thing they wanted was a revolutionary Welsh woman publishing this autobiography about her time in the Crimea. And so it was literally pushed aside, written off, buried in history for literally, years and years and years. And then eventually Donna Mead, who works for the RCN, she decided to do a lot of research on Betsy, and she went and found the grave in London and had a lovely service for her and put up a lovely stone with her name on, and the nurses went and had a service and commemorated her life. And that's how then they campaigned for her name to be on the health board in North Wales. So it's now named after her. But that was apparently quite a battle as well, because people didn't know enough about her or her work. So
sounds really collaborative, like all these women lifting her up and bringing her forward. It's really maybe a bit emotional. This is really nice.
That is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And however long it took, and that she didn't see it in her lifetime. I spotted that you have got a partnership, I think is the right word, with Nights Out. Where would people be able to book you to come and do a production, or where would people be able to come and see a production of Daughter of Vala?
The Night Out scheme is actually run by the Arts Council of Wales. It's a scheme that allows volunteers or community groups to actually book production without having to worry too much about the whole cost, covering the whole cost of it. So the idea is that it takes theatre to communities all over Wales, small venues, and they don't have to worry about covering the costs with their ticket sales, because the Arts Council will subsidise the productions. So it's available to all organisations, all volunteers, maybe village halls, WIs, anywhere really that has a venue that we can perform in. And we don't need a huge space. We're quite happy with a small space, and our set is completely portable. Yeah, it's a really great scheme actually run by the Arts Council, and we're really delighted that they accepted our production onto it. And people can book via the Arts Council, but we have a link on our website as well. Yes, that's
Wales really drives the arts, don't they? They really care about arts and heritage and stuff. We're very good at that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think we are a very creative nation.
We've also got another couple of performances coming up, which is very exciting, in August. And we're part of a theatre festival that's going to take place on the 9th and 10th of August in Newport at the Phyllis Maud, which is a tiny little theatre space which has been adapted from a gentleman's toilet, a historic building.
Wow.
It's very, very tiny.
I don't know how Betsy would feel about this, Adele.
I'm not sure. No, I'm not sure. So yes, we're going to be part of that festival, and you'll have to look on our website for more details about that. But we're excited about doing that as well.
We'll link it in the show notes so people can find out, can't we?
So we're quite happy we're very flexible, and we just love it. It's because we love it. We love what we do. We're really privileged to do it, and we just love telling this story. It's been so much fun, and Claire is utterly brilliant as Betsy as well.
And Adele is actually brilliant at everything else.
I love talking to other people who are kind of into the same things, because it is quite a niche thing, isn't it? This drag on these women from history that you don't know about, and we've been like dipping our toe, Cara, haven't we, into guests on the podcast to learn different stories, and I just love it every time. It just fills me with joy. So thank you so much for spending your evening with us. And I'm sorry our questions probably weren't as good as those 6-year-olds. I'm sorry about that. You've got nothing to bring to the table.
Nothing. This has been wonderful. Thank you very, very much, both of you. As Vicky said, it's just a joy to meet other people who are excited about this and want to tell these stories. So I am super, super looking forward to seeing the play, whether that is in a gent's toilets or not, wherever it may be, I will be there. So thank you so much for for being our guest today. And
You're more than welcome. Oh, thank
really
you.
do appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for listening to this episode of She Changed History. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe and comment below. Find us on our socials, Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. If you've got any ideas of women you'd like us to cover in a future episode, please comment on the socials or email us at shechangedhistory@gmail.com. Catch you next time.